Keisha Bisram, and you're listening to the Every Shade podcast. My next guest is Lorrel Manning. Lorrel is an award-winning writer, director, actor, and musician who works in both film and theater. Lorrel has an MFA in film from Columbia University and a BFA in drama from the University of Georgia. His first feature film, Happy New Year, based on his critically acclaimed play and award-winning short film of the same name, had its world premiere at the 2011 South by Southwest Film Festival and has screened at over 24 film festivals. The film won multiple awards in the US and abroad and was officially released by the Snag Films in 2013. Most recently, Lorrel wrote and directed 3 short films for the Guggenheim Studios: The Great Love Rosemary, Pure, and My Father's Heart. He is currently prepping for more upcoming productions. However, in today's interview, we focus on Awake, a critically acclaimed play that he has directed and starred in. Awake received its world premiere at the Bauer Group in January 2019. The play is a series of vignettes seeping into different lives of people in America facing issues surrounding racism, immigration, privilege, and anything you could think of that has risen to the surface in the past couple of years. The End Connection, a story about an interracial couple where the black woman overhears her white boyfriend's uncle using the N-word without a second thought. This leads to an argument between the two without a resolution. The Date. Susan, who works for a not-for-profit, goes on a date with Matt, a Wall Street trader. Susan complains about her coworker's job performance, and she happens to be a black woman. Matt begins to pour out his honest racist point of view once he hears about the woman's racial background. Saving Souls. A Latina mother is in a parent-teacher meeting due to her son presenting a factual class report on Hitler that has upset other students and their parents. Mrs. West, the teacher, tries to explain to Bertina that the school promotes diversity and tolerance among its students, while aiming to force an apology from the mother and passively threatening to revoke the student's financial aid. The Interview. A well-respected black preacher is waiting for a friend in a coffee shop. An enthusiastic black college student approaches him and starts a casual conversation to suddenly reveal a confrontational secret that ties the preacher to the church's position in the LGBTQ community. A and J rule the universe. Alex and Jeremy are a couple of typical teenage boys driving around while eating fast food and sharing silly stories of urban legends and probably false sexual conquest. However, as the story goes on, the reason for their car ride becomes clear and disturbing to the audience. The Future. Similar to the adolescence of Alex and Jeremy, Jennifer and Max are the typical big sister and kid brother duo as they banter about Beyonce and school teachers. But over time, we learn about the heartbreaking and disturbing fact of their mother's disappearance and the emotional realization of where they're heading. Carlos the Protector. A tough cop talks about his tragic interference in an abusive situation while being criticized, only to be criticized again at the very end of the monologue. Flowers. Cynthia, a black woman, joins an all-white women's film discussion group in an upscale gated community. Cynthia tells the story of the racially explosive events that ultimately leads her to her arrest and to the anger management group she's presently in. Hands, probably the most hopeful vignette of Awake. A New Jersey store owner and community leader, also an immigrant from the Middle East, turns around her troubled relationship with the neighborhood kids and makes a positive difference in their lives. So, Lorrel,
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you for actually hopping on this interview with me, because I created this podcast because during this whole COVID, aspect of what's going on this year, I actually launched my YouTube channel back in March when the quarantine just started.
I watched some of the videos you were making. Were you making stuff? You were like,
I was trying
it
to
was a cooking channel, was it?
It
Or,
was basically like a satire, kind of like a skit of like making fun of the expectations of women, but yet the reality of what we do, but also showing that the reality of what women go through on a day-to-day basis is actually not supposed to be seen as something that's abnormal. So things kind of went down south, and it took me a while to bounce back up, and I thought, what can I do to continue working? Because I just felt like I needed to exercise my practice,
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know a lot of cool people who've done so much work, and it's like I can just do a podcast and just talk to them and talk about their process and everything. And you were definitely on my list because I know you've done so much in your past, and on top of that, like you've done Awake. And the funny thing is, I've been asking artists, what project do you want to talk about? And when I emailed you, I'm like, I hope he wants to talk about Awake.
No, I want to talk about this project I did in high school. Really changed my life. Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Boring. Yeah.
I remember when you first started Awake, back in like 2016.
Were you there? Yeah, you were there. Did you go to you went to the readings, right?
The very like first few when you
Yeah,
first
yeah.
started drafting.
Oh,
Very,
yeah.
very early on. Yeah, it was like back in
Yeah.
16, I believe, in the very end of the
Were
year.
you one of the actors that came to my apartment? And
Yes. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I can remember that initial group. I think I thanked you in the program, I think. I
Yeah.
think.
It was very. It was in the like early
Yeah.
stages, and
Yeah.
I just remember it going. I remember you also. I remember the End Connection was also part of like another like short. Like
Yeah, that's actually what started the whole awake thing,
yeah.
that my mentor from my Columbia days, Lenora Coven, she was my acting teacher at Columbia. And I went to film school, but I was an actor before I went to film school, but because I'd studied acting undergrad and playwriting, and then I went to film school. And so, I thought it was very wise of them to have directors take acting classes, so know what it's like in front of the camera. So she was my acting teacher, and I continued my acting while I was at Columbia, acting these downtown plays or whatever. So we've stayed tight, very close, even at Columbia while I was there and afterwards. And so, having coffee, or she'd read a script to give me feedback, that kind of thing. So she had this workshop of writer directors that has been going. She taught out of her apartment on the Upper East Side for like, I don't know, 20, 30 years, I think. And I could never go because I was always busy or working or teaching. But she had this festival. She was going to retire. And she's like probably 91, 92 now. I just spoke to her a couple of weeks ago. And she said, it's time for me I just want to rest now. So she had this, she wanted to go out with a bang and, her finally retiring. So she put in this festival called the R Plays, and it was about the R word being racism. And she commissioned me, asked me to write a play about anything I wanted to, had to do with some form of racism. So I couldn't think of anything because there's so many things I wanted to write about. So then this idea came to me based on an event that happened in my own life. And I wrote The End Connection. And it's basically about an interracial couple who are very close, and it's a white man and a black woman, and they're going to Matt and Melanie, and they're getting ready to go to Matt's celebration of Matt's cousin graduating from college. It's like a dinner party or something like that at a restaurant or something. And they have gotten a gift for him. And Melanie is very tight with Matt's family. So Matt's uncle calls, and Melanie steps out for a second to go get the mail downstairs, and he puts him on speakerphone, and he's getting dressed. And somewhere in the conversation, they talk about the gift that Melanie got for the I can't even remember the kid's name in my own script, but anyway, they talk about the secret gift they got him. It's something he's always wanted. So she comes back in, and he wanted some kind of Yeezys or something. Yeah, that's what he wanted. But they've been sold out everywhere. But Melanie had a connection somewhere. And the uncle goes, "Oh, she get those Yeezys and whatever?" And she probably got some N connection in the hood or something. Is that how she got them? Jokingly, in a joking manner, he uses the N word. And Matt doesn't correct him. And Melanie overhears this, and then she, coughs a bit and let him know that she's back in the apartment. And Matt quickly hangs up wraps up the call and says, "Oh, we'll see you in a bit." And so he doesn't say anything. He doesn't know what she heard or anything. He just wants to ignore that what just happened. So eventually they go on, like, getting ready and everything. And then she casually asks him, about what was said on the phone, and they have a whole big discussion about it, about the use of the N word. And Matt's excuse is like, he grew up in a different. My uncle grew up in a different time, and that word was used. He doesn't use it all the time. He just uses it sometimes. It's not a big deal. And she's like, it is a big deal, and I have to go around these people. And that's what they're calling me behind their back. And he's like, no one's calling you that behind your back. So it's a big discussion about the use of the N word and how when it's who's permitted to say it and who's not. And the argument is on both sides about, whatever. That's all I'll say. And that's basically the play was a big hit at the festival. Huge hit. And I was encouraged by the response that I write more plays dealing with current events or current issues that are plaguing our culture right now. And so I began to write a series of other plays after the response to that play. And I came up with Awake, and a series of plays, or vignettes if you want, and monologues that touched on everything from the use of the N-word to homophobia in the Black community, to climate change, to the immigrant issue, to anti-Semitism, to school violence and gun violence. And so it was everything that was plaguing me that was keeping me up at night. And that's why I called it Awake. And I sought not to have a solution to these, my best to present, I guess you would call it, conversation starters, for people to see themselves in these characters. And I try my best to not take sides. I would present an issue and present both sides of it. And a lot of the plays are very complex. They dealt with more than one issue. And thank God I had my dramaturg, Christine Serger, to help me with editing. So we did a reading in my apartment of the first round of plays, which you were part of, Keisha, and some other actors. And then I proceeded to just fine tune them. We had several readings over the next 2 years, and finally it was given an off-Broadway production by the Barra Group in June of 2019. So yeah, so it was pretty fast if you think about it,
Yeah, it was.
And so I decided to keep the End Connection in that group of plays because it started it all. It actually started off the show. It was the least. It was probably there was comedy in the piece and all the pieces, but it was like nervous laughter in a way. There was some laugh out loud moments, but End Connection stayed with it. But that's where it started basically. Was with the R plays, and that was I think that show was in 2017, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember those plays. I remember it was
Yeah.
there. Yeah, and what's interesting about Awake is that it's so triggering and
Yeah.
so relative at all at the same time. It's like I feel like, and I'm sure you have this response too, but I remember watching the full play of Awake and just feeling all emotions happening at once. Like you just feel that you are these people, but then you're not these people, and you dealt with these
Yeah.
situations at the same time, and it's really scary. Also,
Hmm.
how realistic that you've made it. I think one thing I want to ask you is about the actors that you have.
Hmm.
All the actors that you have are just so incredible. They're so
Yeah.
incredible, and all of these issues, each of the plays are extremely triggering.
Hmm.
What was the process like working with these actors?
Um, Before we had a long, we had a series of readings. We had like 3 or 4 readings for over the span of like a year and a half. And a lot of the actors, when we went to the Barrow Group, I told a lot of the actors, I said, look, this is official production. They have final say on who gets cast because they're producing it. They're letting me direct and write and whatever. And so I'm always very honest with my actors and pay them, stipend when I could. And I believe in doing that going forward, definitely. Starting from that piece. Well, I did that before, but so when we auditioned, first thing I'll say is that because it was a 15-member cast, and that's crazy, an off-Broadway show, 15 member cast was crazy, and the Bar Group wanted to do it. At first, we talked about possibly actors doubling up, but none of the pieces worked, that way. It just didn't work. So we decided to just go for it, which means we had to have a limited contract or whatever they decided to do with it. And we auditioned people. Then the actors who'd been with me for a year and a half came through, I call them the callbacks, the very final round. And a lot of them were recast, but some weren't. And they understood that. So, and they were fine with it. They just liked being a part of it anyway, any step of the process. So I continued to work on the pieces during rehearsal. We would read them. And I think it was Martin Scorsese or some famous director said 80% of directing is casting. So number one, get the kick-ass actor that you want, and then someone who's going to give you their opinion. Basically, that's how I like to cast. Who's going to work with you and collaborate. I like to look at everything as a collaboration. Yeah, I've made the blueprint, which is a script, and now we're going to build this house together. So. A lot of times we'd read through the scripts. Once people were cast, we'd read through them, whatever. And I'll just ask for, what are your thoughts? You know? And I had to create an environment where people were comfortable giving me their opinion without being fear of being fired or anything like that. And I would say, you're not going to be fired. I may not take all of your suggestions, but I just want to hear your thoughts because you're going to be playing this character. Does anything sound untrue or inauthentic? And they would be very honest with me. And so they helped me shape the pieces. And most of the time, Christine Serker, my dramaturg, was in the room, and she would silently write notes, and then we would have meetings, and then I would go and rewrite, and then I would give it to her, and then she'd give me her feedback, and then I'd have some other friends read who were readers of mine and give me their feedback, and then we go back into rehearsal and give it to the actors. Sometimes I would have them improv a certain section if I was having issues with it. And then I would take that and then put it in my own words. And so it was a very collaborative process. So we had some really, really great actors. I would say there was one South Asian actor who did a piece about racism between Blacks and South Asians, which I'd seen a lot in my neighborhood. And before even auditioning people for that monologue, I had a lot of people from that community who were my friends read this piece and say, is this authentic? Do I have a right to write this or whatever? I'm just writing what I saw. And so I did a lot of research, and all of them said, this is fantastic. This does happen, and we don't talk about it enough. So I'm glad you're writing it. So, but when I got that actor, she helped me even clean up even a bit more, just in terms of how she spoke, and she did a lot of research on the character herself, and she would come back and say, I think we should say it this way, blah, blah, blah. And about 80% of the time, I would say, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Other times, if I didn't agree, I would basically say, hey, I need this to stay this way because of this, and then she would understand. So it was really, really collaborative, and it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I've never worked so hard on a show because I was writing and directing 9 pieces with 15 actors, rewriting as we went along, also having production meetings, and I was also starring in one of them. And I didn't want to star in it, but the artistic directors insisted that I do this one role because I'd done it in all the readings. And the only reason I did it in the readings was because I didn't want to deal with an extra actor. So I said, when it comes time to direct this, I'm going to cast somebody else so I could just sit back. But nope, they're like, nope, we want you to do this part. So I was like, okay, I'll do it. And so Christine Serker actually directed that one piece that I was in. And I just became an actor. So it was a bit of a vacation for me in those rehearsals because I could just act, So that was the experience of it. And when we were in previews, we continued to just fine tune the pieces a bit more. And then once we opened, that was it. I didn't do any more changes to the script,
That collaborative process is so amazing. And hearing that you fine tune it to get it to where it needs to be. For each piece, I mean, because there's nine little vignettes that's going on.
Yeah. It was like 6 plays or little 10-minute plays and 3 monologues.
How did you? I mean, this is probably a loaded question. I mean, all my questions are pretty loaded, but it's there's so many topics that have blown up so much in the past 4 years, and they're just up. How did you decide Or I guess, can you talk more about the process of deciding what story to tell?
Well, there were 13, 14, maybe, no, actually 15 pieces that were written for it. And Christine and I basically narrowed it down to 9.
Mm.
There was a Me Too piece that we desperately wanted in there, but it just wasn't ready. It was the last thing I wrote, and we took that out the very last minute. We even had auditions for that particular piece, and we just decided it wasn't ready. And I was very proud of it, but I felt that it could be it should be a full play, maybe. A lot of them could be, some of the reviewers said that these could actually go on to be longer pieces if you wanted to. But we took that one out for time, and just because I just didn't have the time to really perfect it the way I wanted to. And the published version of it, which we're working on right now, will have the actual show, which would be the 9 pieces, and plus, well, I call them the B-sides, the extra 6 pieces that didn't make the show. So if people want to do a production of it, they can, mix and match. But there are certain pieces that will have to be in the show that I'll say you have to do. But you can exchange this piece for that other piece. So we covered so many topics. How did I do it? All the issues, it was called Awake, but play on words. One reason it's called Awake is because these were all the issues that were keeping me awake at night. Whether it's police brutality, which we're still seeing. Don't get me started on that. There was a cop monologue in it, and that was the hardest thing for me to write. And I'll say why later. But so sorry.
I said, please do, because that's something I did want to ask as well.
Yeah, there's a monologue called Carlos the Protector, and it's from the point of view of a cop who has been accused of being a racist because he killed someone when he was on a domestic call. A woman was being abused, a black woman was being abused by her boyfriend, and she called the police, and he abused her so badly that she had become basically hysterical. And it was a darkened room, and she was holding an object in her hand that had a reflection on it, and it blinded him a little bit. So he assumed it was a gun and just shot her. So it's written from the point of view of someone who is a really good, guess and quote unquote, good egg, but was just a victim of, not a victim of, I don't know what's the right word to say this. He was just basically scared and didn't know what to do. It was his life or hers, and he jumped the gun. But I presented it in a way so it's really gray. You don't know if he did it out of because he was, he's had some deep racism going on, or because he was genuinely nervous and just fighting for, protecting himself. That was very hard to me to write because of all the things we see in the news, even up to this day. Um, um, and I, as a black man, have always had some kind of issue with policemen just because of the way I've been treated. And so it was very hard for me to get in the mindset of someone and actually feel any kind of empathy for them. But that I did it. And that was probably I found a way in, and I had some policemen that I knew read it. Um, if I'm writing about an occupation that I'm not familiar with, I try to befriend anyone in that occupation, or find people that I know. Do you know a military person, or a veteran, or someone like this, and that I could interview? And I try to interview them and then have them read the piece after in various stages once I get to trust them. And so I did, and they all said this is pretty accurate in terms of how he laid out the story and everything. And so you don't know if this guy's a good guy or a bad guy. And so I think that angered a lot of people because I think some people felt that I was taking his side because I didn't make him automatically guilty. That was up to the audience to decide. And my point at that time was to try and say, is there a gray area sometimes with these policemen, and then that they are sometimes really are scared, but it's still no reason to shoot people, riddle people with bullet holes. So that was very difficult for me to get in that person's head. Would I write that again? Probably not, but I'm glad I did challenge myself to write that. And some people in the audience did appreciate that. And I made him Latino. I made him a Latino cop, and because I felt if it was a white cop, there was no way that we were going to see any kind of gray area on stage with this guy at all.
Mhm.
And so I made him Carlos, and so I did a lot of research on Carlos and met some Latino cops, and so and interviewed them. And some of them, I interviewed several policemen for another project that I was working on, a film project, my second feature, and they opened up to me, and I was pretty horrified by some of the things they said to me. And that was really the seed was planted for Carlos, because a way how they saw black and brown people, I won't go into that, but it was pretty disturbing. And I had to sit there and not um, make a face or judge or anything, just because I wanted them to open up even more to me. But I was horrified by some of the things they said to me, and just how they look at people on the street, and they're trained that way. And it's coming out now, several years later. So
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up Carlos the Protector, because I have to admit, when I watched Awake, I think that was the one monologue
yeah,
that I had a hard time having empathy towards the character.
I
But
didn't want you to, but I wanted you to say, well, maybe,
what's interesting about it, because you mentioned gray area, and what's interesting
Yeah.
about some vignettes of Awake, or maybe all of them, it does raise other issues other than police brutality,
Yeah.
right? Because you mentioned that he's just scared and he's facing a situation that people don't understand, that when you're pushing
Hmm.
to a corner, like there's so many levels of
Yeah.
what policemen go through, and women too, and it does raise you to question more than just police brutality, which for me, I mean, I do have very strong opinions about it too,
Yeah.
but there's so many other levels to it that we tend to forget. And I think
Yeah.
that like, you introducing that makes you think about other issues that come into play other than what we see,
Yeah.
in the media or in social media and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, and
This
I
was
guess,
this. Yeah. Go ahead.
no, no,
This
no.
was a situation in which I want to just tell a story about, and some people got mad at me for writing that. I had a friend who had an issue with it, and he saw it the second time, and he was like, I actually like that monologue. But it really angered me, because I was like, are you taking the side of the cops? I'm like, no, I'm not. But I'm not. Um, my beliefs or whatever, you know me very well, rather.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to present another side and see if I could do it, and I did. And so it got people talking. It really, really did. And at the end of the monologue, he basically, I think we don't decide who he's talking to. It could be a therapist, or it could be review board or whatever. And someone asks him, if would you have treated this woman the same way if she were white? And he repeats the question, and he gets really angry, which I'm not going to say anything. That fact that he gets angry at that question and he almost jumps out of his seat should say more than it should say enough.
Yeah.
But I let the audience decide what they.
Well,
um,
I do want to ask, because I do know what your opinions and your beliefs are when it comes to politics. You do have these characters such as Carlos the Protector, A and J rule the universe, and was it Matt from the End Connection?
yeah,
Um, Also, well, I don't want to say the date was kind of a different character, but I guess like you give these characters a very strong point of view
yeah,
and a very like three-dimensional point of view. They're not just flat characters who are just blatantly racist, or like blatantly.
yeah.
There's more.
That
They have like their opinions, and like they're very three-dimensional. Like I guess what I want to ask you as a writer, like how, because you just said that you did have difficulty writing Carlos the Protector.
yeah.
What was the process like of writing these characters that go against your beliefs?
Um, um, on the date, which is a white corporate businessman, having dinner with a white, I guess you would call liberal type
Yeah.
woman. And over the course of the dinner, or I think it's their fourth date or fifth date, can't remember. She discovers how racist he is, and it's just in the views of like black and brown people in corporate America. So I needed to flesh out that character, because my goal with the piece was not to just, a lot of times when we go to see plays, where you see the racists on stage, they're so overblown
Mm.
and not relatable, or okay, that's the and so a white person sitting there going, okay, that's not me. So I wanted to present a show where a white liberal could go to a play and go, yeah, okay, I recognize this guy. Yeah, I know that guy. Yeah, I work with that guy. And then he says something else. You go, wait a minute, I've had those same thoughts. What does that say about me? So that was my goal.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So it wasn't just for the white liberal audience, but when I wrote those characters, that's what I was going for. Can you see yourself at all in any of these people on stage? And if so, what are you going to do about it? So it was very important for me to get the quote unquote other side, I guess. And so one of the things about me as a researcher is that I'm non-judgmental when I'm trying to get work. So I'll get people to talk, I'll open up. And I've been doing that for years, since my first feature film. Put people at ease so they don't feel like they're being judged. And so I have a lot of, I guess, straight conservative friends and some really far left friends. Not as close to them now, but that I grew up with down south. And
Mm.
so when I go home, we hang out. We don't talk about politics. We talk about it a little bit, because we'll get into discussions and it gets heated, but we'll talk about movies. We'll talk about, um, books or anything we've read, or music. And strangely enough, they all love hip hop. It's yeah. And I'm doing research and also hanging out with people that I knew. And so occasionally, once we get more comfortable, I'll start talking about, I guess, things that are relevant, whether it be political or socio-political things. And so, and we start talking, I'll get their viewpoint, and I don't fight. I'll just say, "Oh, why do you feel that way?" Well, some people would say, "Blah blah blah blah." So, what is your view on that? Oh, that's bullshit. Blah 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 blah. And so, I'm recording the whole time, and not for any particular piece, but I'm just like keeping that in the back of my mind, for maybe I'll use it somehow just to understand. And I really did. I went out of my way to try and understand when Trump was elected, because I realized, I woke up like a lot of people did. I knew this was all racism was the undercurrent of American, the way we operate basically and how we got here. Um, but I was still somewhat, I guess I believed all the pundits and all the polls that we were going to have a Democrat in the White House, and we didn't. And this was a blatant reaction to Obama's presidency for 8 years. And so I wanted to go and just understand. So I went out of my way to listen to podcasts that I would never listen to. I did this for like 2 years. Ben Shapiro was number one on my list of people I listened to. Tried Alex Jones, just too insane. But there are a lot of YouTube channels I would listen to on their their videos or whatever, just to see how they would report on the story. And then I would go to the far left, and then I would go to the moderates. And so then you start to get a picture of how people view America and the different stories and how we can all be manipulated. One thing I discovered was that, say, for instance, you have the far left podcast, and you have the far right podcast, and they would report on the same story. Each one would leave out interesting details to strengthen your argument. They did it more so on the far right, of course. I shouldn't say of course, but they did. But far left would leave out some details too, or they would just like downplay them. And but I was like, wow, interesting. And I remember being in Europe several years ago and watching their newscasts and how they report on American issues, and I would just sit there just mesmerized. And my aunt would say, why are you watching the news? Why are you watching about America? I just want to see how you guys report on our news. It's so much, it's so unbiased, you know? It's just the straight facts,
As it
you
should
know? Yeah. And it's like, wow, maybe, was it ever this way here? But I don't know. And so you start to, like, when you create a character like Matt, who is a white liberal type, but comes from a very, very, I guess, family who's somewhat racist. Um, and he has to confront his own racism in this moment with his black girlfriend, Melanie. It was hard for me. It wasn't hard for me because that's a lot of people I know. Like I said, that was triggered by an experience. That's something I went through myself. Um, but then there's the corporate businessman who's really far left, but hides it very well in corporate America. Those were people I knew. It was a composite of, it was a combination of various people that I knew and some other research I did. So to complete that character, and then I had a kick-ass dramaturg who would tell me, this is a little bit caricaturish, this line. Um, and I would say, okay, yeah, okay, let me change that. And even the actor too, in the late stages of it would tell me, oh God, you got my friends down. Oh my God, So it was, I took it all in and just used it. So.
Yeah, the character in The Date, he was, and you're right, when we do see like a racist character on stage, he's almost like a caricature or like a cartoon.
Yeah.
And then you immediately don't feel anything for that person. You're like, he's just, annoying racist person. But you created this character that was so comfortable and had a very strong belief system.
Yeah.
And I remember just hearing that for the first time and just seeing that character. It was just the discomfort that just went through the audience because
why
that person was so real.
Yeah, and for it to work, you have to like him. He can't just be like a straight villain. He can't just be evil.
Right.
He has to be funny. You have to be able to relate. You have to like some aspect. You have to like some part of him, and the audience does. And I think that's why it's disturbing, because you do, even though you hate him in the end, he's funny. You've seen this really sexist, misogynistic guy who's super charming, and he's very nice to her and to the woman he's out with, but he puts her down. He's very, very, he uses a lot of microaggressions in the date, and so it's and I think that's what's the most disturbing for people, because he kind of charmed you into liking him, and then you find out that he's a creep. He's got some really disturbing beliefs, and you probably won't ever change him, and that's disturbing to people. Because this is your next door neighbor, this is your uncle, might be elements of your boyfriend. You know what I mean? Who said a few things under his breath, or at times when in the heated situation, and then said, "Oh, I didn't mean that," or whatever. You don't know, and so that makes you uncomfortable, I think, because he's so recognizable, and he's not a cartoon. He's someone you probably deal with every day, and just ignore the things he says. So I was very proud of that character. So, and when she throws a drink on him at the end of the play, some nights she got applause because she represented the audience who wanted to basically smack that guy down. And his parting line was hilarious. But I had a lot of time. I had fun with all of them. All of the pieces. They all challenged me in different ways, and it was one of the most rewarding, exhilarating experiences of my life. I forgot to say earlier that I was writing, directing, and acting, and I was working around the clock because I was also teaching full time at the same time, while rehearsals or whatever. And I lost sleep. I was sleeping like 4 or 5 hours a night for about 6 months. I didn't care, because I was doing everything I've ever dreamed of doing, and they were paying me to do it. So I didn't have to compromise, or hardly have to compromise anything. Seth and Lee, who are the co-artistic directors of the Barra Group, just basically let me go. They let me fly, and it was amazing. And I mean, we would have note sessions, like we had maybe 2 notes sessions where they would look at current versions of the script after I'd rewritten it, and they would give me their notes. And they said, you can incorporate these or not. A lot of times I did, because they were very good notes. Other times I didn't. As far as the production, they let me go. They pushed back on a couple of things, and because they're artistic directors, they have to sign off on everything. I totally understood that. And there was only 1 or 2 times where I absolutely pushed back. I said, no, that's the show. I'm keeping that. And they would say, okay, fine. And I'm glad I did. But other times, we would make compromises, which I wasn't afraid to do, or didn't feel I was losing. bending a little bit more in their direction in terms of things, in terms of the technical aspects of the show. But yeah, they've been my mentors for 20 years, them along with Lenore DeKoven. So, and I valued their input, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I do have a question about the setup of the
Yeah.
stage
Yeah.
that I found really interesting. So you had the actors watching on the side. What was the choice?
Yeah, it was sort of like a mini thrust stage where, there was prosceniums, whatever. It's like, well, the actors came out. We had like this amazing, well, in the readings, I didn't know I didn't want it to seem like a scene night, So there's 9 little, I think in the readings we may have had, it went from 8 plays, 8 little vignettes to 10 at one point. Then it went back down to 9 or whatever. Um, I didn't want it to seem like scene night. Oh, here's the next scene. Here's the next 10-minute play. Like, you see which is fine, but I didn't want that to be this. I wanted the whole evening to be an experience for the audience. And so when we did the first readings, I just had this idea right before we went on to have the actors divided and put a group of chairs in the middle of the stage and have 2 rows on the sides lining the walls. And so we would sit there the entire time. Then it was our time to go on stage. We would kind of go to those chairs. That's how the reading was. And when I met with Shika Shimizu, this amazing production designer that I hired, who was recommended to me by a couple of people, she interviewed me and said, well, how did the readings go? How did you do the readings? And I told her. And so she incorporated that into her set design. And so she came with this amazing stage, which on the floor, I don't know if you saw, you had to be sitting high enough to see. It was a distressed American flag, and these set pieces that were these chairs, and with the actors come in, and this huge like mess of like metal and wood on the stage, and this chairs stacked on top of each other in this weird like configuration. It's almost like an art piece. And then in a blast, the actors come in. This was the actual show. The actors come in and they dismantle the chairs, and then we take our seat. We put the chairs on either side of the stage, where the stage is elevated and we're on the side of the floor. So the actors have to stay there the entire time of length of the show. There was an intermission, so we got a break. But it was very important for me. We kept that part of it because, number one, we didn't want it to seem like it was a scene night. And it was going to be an experience from the beginning to the end. And so the actors sort of became like jurors, in a way, watching each little case go up, basically, if you want to call it that. And they were spectators, became spectators. Sometimes they laughed, sometimes they didn't, you know what I mean? But I gave them instructions to not move. For it to really work, they had to be like statues almost. And and in between shows, in between little plays, they would, certain actors would run up and reconfigure the stage for the next setup, and then take a seat back, go back to their seats, or go to a different seat. And so that became very fun. It wasn't fun convincing the actors to do it.
Well, they didn't want to do it?
No, well, they had to get used to sitting there still for
Okay.
2 hours, because if anyone moved across their legs or anything during a performance of someone on stage, the audience's eye will go right to that person on the side. So they get a chance to move around and adjust during the scene changes. But once the new play started, you had to sit frozen. So they got used to it after a while. And a lot of them thanked me afterwards for that experience, because they got to see, because a lot of times when you do those like scene nights, you don't get to see and experience the play with the audience. This time you do. And you got to see your fellow actors transform every night and grow with their characters and grow with the pieces and become more and more comfortable in front of the audience. And it was amazing. And so it really made us even tighter as a group, because it made us a family, and we were presenting the show as a family, as a unit. And it wasn't individual actors. Everyone got their moment to shine, but we were all cheering each other on. And so I don't regret that at all. And so it added to the immediacy of the piece, I think, you know, of the experience of the audience. Because they, at first, once they realized the actors were never going to leave the stage, they were on the sides, they were fascinated by that. And then they just kind of blended into the scenery,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I remember being so fascinated by that when I saw that for the first time. And there's something fascinating and also eerie about it because
Yeah.
I feel, I mean, the timing of this, you know, this play is so great because all these issues that are arising in this country, um, I feel like I feel a sensation that the whole world is watching, right? And
Yeah.
I just feel like I remember seeing Awake and seeing the actors sitting there. It just gave me that sensation, like, yes, everyone's seeing these problems now. Everyone's watching.
Yeah.
We're all seeing it.
Yeah. And it's funny now because a lot of the issues that we were um, shining a bright light on made people uncomfortable. It really did. This was 2019. Now, just about everything, a year and a half later, just about everything that we were um, putting forth, any issue that has come to the forefront, to the national discussion of some sort, whether it's especially police brutality, um, the immigration issue,
Right.
um, um, gun violence, all of that stuff is and have become major talking points in our national discourse. So that's it's interesting. I get calls all the time for people we should revive it, put it on Zoom or something. We need it, and I'm like, I do think it's relevant now, but I think right now it'd be preaching to the choir. These were taboo topics to put on stage at that time, even in 2019. Even though a lot of off-Broadway plays were doing it, other things, but not like we were,
Mhm.
because we were tackling so much at once. And it was important for me to just have conversation starters, to just dip my toe into that poison well for a little bit, and then have you deal with the outcome however you felt, however you wanted to, when you went home. And I got so many emails afterwards and phone calls of people saying to me, I've been wanting to have this discussion with my family for all of these years about different issues that were brought up in that show, and we did after your play, so thank you.
Mhm.
And so I would relay that to the actors, because I wrote it, but yeah, and directed it, but the actors helped me bring it to life. And so that was relieving. And we had this kind of, I think the marketing director at Barra Group, Emily, forget her last name, she had this great idea where she put up where people could write their thoughts about the show on a bulletin board afterwards. What are your thoughts about Awake? And I was terrified. I was like, oh my God, people are going to rip the show apart. And they didn't. And so she says, you have to be brave enough. You got to put this out there. Be brave enough to hear what people have to say about it. And so it was full of just thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I have just all kinds of things. Not one negative post. If there was, I didn't see it. And it was hundreds of them. And it was very, very moving to see that. And I had to let my guard down and just say, okay, because I was nervous at first, because I'm dealing with a lot, and but the response for it was tremendous, more than I could ever have hoped for. So, but I am working on a sequel to it for the Zoom platform. It would
Mhm.
be more like a film, but it's so all the issues in Awake were things that people were afraid to talk about, and I still think even though we're talking about things, we're not really getting deep enough. You
Mm-mm.
know, um, for about 3 weeks after the George Floyd protests and the Black Lives Matter protests all over the world, I'll say the world. I joked with a friend of mine. I said, I'd never seen my Instagram so black. There were so many posts, which was moving,
Yeah.
and so like just people protesting and like sharing information, white, black, brown, everybody was doing it. We were all in it together, but life goes on and you start to see less of them. you know
Yeah, I want to ask. I mean, I have a few more questions.
yeah,
I want to ask about that because that's something that really breaks my heart.
yeah,
Past couple of years and now even, it's just yes, I mean, I'm all about like peace activism. I'm all about
yeah.
conversation. I'm all about talking about it, educating each other, so on and so forth. But when at what point does maybe not even change, but action happens, because I do love that Awake does challenge you to think, you know, think more than just your side of the story, but just think
Yeah.
of other levels, and start the conversation, and not to be fearful of having that conversation. But what happens next, you know? And it's kind of a question of like, even with Awake's future, it's like what happens next with it, because you have all these like open-ended vignettes. They don't have solutions to it, right? And it's kind of
No.
happening now too. It's like everyone's coming out of the woodwork, but there's still no like solution either, you know?
Yeah, I don't know if the next version will have a solution. I think it might, some of them might be, but everyone's got different solutions. You can, you
Mhm.
know, everyone doesn't feel the same way. I think for me, I say work on yourself. If there's something in you that you need to change, start educating yourself, start reading books, read your history. I'm even rereading some of my own history. I've been studying African American history since first year of college, I think, and realizing how I was duped from grade 1 through 12. And so educating myself, and I hung around a lot of people that were older than me, and so they would give me books to read. I'm going back to those books and rereading them. I'm reading other books, and I tell my friends, start with yourself, and then start with the close people that are closest to you, because you have to start with yourself first. You can't preach to someone else if you're not doing that yourself. So um in terms of change, um on a deeper level, on I want people to vote. I think you have to, if you want to see things change. Do I think Biden and Harris are going to change things significantly? No, but they will buy us some time. You know
Mm,
what I mean?
yeah.
um they will,
Yeah.
and so I'm putting my hat in that ring to get behind them, because what other choice do I have? I can't, because I think I heard a speech recently. Marianne Williamson said, she said these first four terms of Donald Trump were Donald Trump holding back.
Mm.
He gets another four, he's going to be on steroids. you know so just think about that. So I'm doing whatever I can to get people out to vote. And I say that, and people say, well, you knew New York always goes blue. What are you going to do? I'm like, you don't know that. You can't trust that. I don't care. You have to get people to vote. Still keep talking about voting, getting absentee ballot if you don't want to go to the, in person. Do whatever you can. So I'm doing my part. So, and also as an artist, to continue to work, because it gets really nauseating and disheartening and just filled with rage every day to see another Black man brutally attacked and killed, and by police. And that just, sometimes I don't even look at the news. I just don't. I say, oh, what video are they showing now? Oh, someone else, and then I can't even look at it. So because I'll get so enraged, and so that has to. I don't know. That has to stop. I even get teary-eyed even thinking about it. But I do my part as a human being, but also do my part as an artist, and to challenge people and to inspire people and empower people to go out and make change. And that's what I'll continue to do. I think that's what I was put here to do, and that's why I was here, and that's what the work will continue to do. Even you can even do it through comedy. You know what I mean? So I think it's sometimes important to laugh. That's just me. Not every artist has to do that, but that I know that's why I was put here, so that's what I'm going to continue to do.
Yeah, I think what you're mentioning too is, it's like a lot of these things that are happening in our country is so normalized. You know, I saw that in the play in Flowers. You know, it's, you know, what she was
Oh,
going through. It's and what she was trying to express, that character. And it's interesting because the world that she was living is normalized, but it's not supposed to be. It shouldn't be normal that she was just.
you mean the Black woman that gets the
Yeah.
police called her? That was basically a Karen situation. I called Sandra. Sandra was the woman who did that monologue, and I said, your friend did the in the in that that you talk about that called the cops on you. It's kind of like a Karen situation, or someone felt that she was being threatened or whatever because you're having a disagreement, and she says, "Oh my God, you're right." So there's probably going to be a sequel to that, maybe in the aftermath of that, of them reconnecting.
Mhm.
I don't know what it's going to be at. I'm making sketches of the piece, but I'm going to take my time with it. It might not premiere until next year, because we need to get through 2020 first. It's going to be a reflection on 2020 because this has been a year from hell, but also a year of strange enlightenment. I say in terms of like the time you spend alone has been very important for people, getting to know yourself a bit, and people who've taken the time to do that, and realizing that all the things I thought were important are not really as important as I thought they were. You
Mm.
know, it's amazing. And I've changed, and for the better, I think, in these last 6 months. I'm much calmer. I'm much more thoughtful. I'd like to think of myself as always being that, but even more so now. And I listen better, trying to, you know, and it's done good things for me. I know that everyone can't say that, but for me, it's been a good thing. And I've been a lot more reflective and stopped beating myself up so much for things I haven't accomplished yet, and just become more patient, you know?
Mhm.
And when I took on that, when I started adopting those things or started to challenge the way I viewed or operated, things started to happen in my life, just in these 6 months, really positive things that I've been waiting on for years. So it's been really good for me, but I'm still going to continue to work and challenge people with my art. So,
Yeah.
yeah. What about for you?
What about for me? What?
How have you been? I know you were interviewing me, but I'm always curious about the person that's interviewing me. Like, how have you changed?
So, first of all, I do have one more question for you about
Okay.
but before I get into that, because it does go on to something else. But it is interesting what you're saying. First of all, everything you're saying about working on yourself, I really admire that and appreciate the fact that you're doing that, because I feel that all of humanity needs that, and I think people fear going inward.
Yeah.
I really do feel that, and it is scary. It's a scary thing to do, to be alone and to look inward and to work on yourself. It's a lot of work, and a lot of levels you got to go through, and a lot of
Yeah.
revelations. But
Yeah.
you come out on the other side and you just gain so much out of it. And for me, when COVID happened and the quarantine happened, I did go through a really dark, depressive time. But
Yeah. I
then,
think a lot of people did. Yeah.
yeah, I think the energy of it,
Yeah.
it's gonna happen. But it did teach me to slow down and really reflect, and to really understand why everything was happening the way it's supposed to happen. And I really, really do believe, this is a probably horrible thing to say, because a lot of people did suffer and lose a lot, and I'm so
Yeah.
grateful that I haven't. But I do believe that things happen for a reason, and
Hmm.
if this didn't happen this year, I think people would have continued to just, you know,
Yeah.
go about what they were doing in the first place and just continuing being angry versus actually taking action. Because I feel like this year is really about pushing people to take action, to
Yeah.
not just even make changes, but even with your own self and your own community and your own family. It's like, all right, it's time to move.
Yeah. Hmm.
Or else we're just gonna keep repeating ourselves, and yeah, it definitely taught me a lot. And I guess what I want to ask you, because it kind of goes into like the future of like what's happening now. Obviously the rest of 2020 is still going on, and who knows what's going to happen in the next few months, and theater is not going to go up for who knows how
No, probably not till next spring, or
long.
or probably 2020, late 2021 or 2022. I don't know. Sorry, excuse me. Um, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I feel like your story, or your vignettes of Awake, really challenges people to look inward and to question themselves. But you have more of like a New York audience, I would say. Is that correct? Or
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, very much so. A lot of people said that you should really travel with this. You should take it to the Midwest. You should take
yeah.
it to,
I was just gonna ask
um,
you if you were thinking of that, because I feel like what's interesting about Awake is that, again, you're not making people choose sides. You're having them think about other issues in their lives that they're afraid
yeah,
to face,
hmm,
right? And I feel like a lot of New Yorkers are okay with taking that challenge.
yeah,
So
yeah,
people like in the Midwest, for example, you know, or like small
Yeah.
towns or smaller cities. I mean, you may have that too, but not as much as like New Yorkers. I mean, is that something that you are considering doing?
Yes, probably with the next piece. There might be some pieces from Awake incorporated into this next piece, which I'm making for the Zoom platform. But I want it to be like a film that could travel or people could go to quote unquote screenings of, which
Mm.
is happening now on Zoom. I think people are doing screenings of, like here in New York, I know they're doing play readings and you have to sign up and you can only, a certain amount of people can go in. But I'm thinking of doing this thing where since we don't know the future of theater right now, I'm optimistic. But what can we do in the meantime? And I do. A lot of people hate the Zoom platform, but because I've been teaching on it for 6 months, like a lot, I have become interested in what can be done on it. And I think it's going to be with us long after the pandemic, and it's going to be another form of expression. And I think we're in the beginning stages of it. It's like the Wild Wild West, and people just trying things and sometimes falling flat on their faces, but sometimes quite beautiful. And I've had to put a couple of interviews where I've discussed this recently, and there was a my friend Philip and his wife Michelle, Philip and Michelle, in Germany, in Berlin. They have a film company slash theater company called Film Gym, and they did a play that Philip wrote, and they did it live. And it wasn't like some of the Zoom readings that I'd seen where people just staring into the camera or slightly off the camera. This was blocking everything. And so the actors were all in different places, and there was lighting and all. It was crazy. And so it was amazing. Half of it was in English, half of it was in German. Maybe two-thirds were in English, a third in German. And I was riveted.
Mm.
And I said, this is amazing. And I'm seeing some amazing things done with the platform. And so, yes, there is a bit of a wall there, but how can we work around that wall so you feel connected? And so write things specifically for the platform, not pretend you're somewhere else. You're not pretending you're on stage, but it's not a film, so don't try to make it a film, but it could be. I'm experimenting with it. And so to keep people engaged. And so, but to touch on these issues. And I think in able to do it has to be in bite-sized chunks. And so that's what I'm doing. And so hopefully that is something that can travel, quote unquote, travel, and people all over can see and talk about maybe. That's what I'm working on in the meantime. I'm also working on my next film, which we hope to go in the next year. But yeah, that's what I'm hoping to do with Awake, or the next Awake like project is just experiment and see what I can do with it. But it'll still be very, very relevant issues. The only thing with the Zoom platform is you can check out, or you can like stop it if it's recorded, pre-recorded, or whatever. But you do what you can. So that's what it's missing when you do that. It doesn't really replace the live theater experience in that way, because you're sort of stuck in this dark room with people, and whether you like the play or not, you're there experiencing it with them. That's a beautiful thing. I don't think um, you can ever replace. But I am embracing change and embracing this new platform to see what I can do with it. And I think it's one of those things, because I have an extensive film background, extensive theater background. So it's one of those things where those two can come together really in a very unique way. So I'm very excited about what we're going to discover with this next piece. So
Yeah, that's exciting. I'm glad that you're still continuing the journey with Awake.
yeah.
By the way, I do want to comment that I really do hope that you do bring back that vignette you were talking about with racism in the South Asian community, because
Oh yeah, that was the monologue. It was Hands. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
I just feel like it's funny because you meant when that came about. Well, yeah, when thinking about Hands, like I just, being a Trinidadian American, being West Indian,
Yeah.
like there's so much racism packed within my culture, my background, and
Yeah.
I remember seeing when I saw Awake, I was like, wow, there is a lot more to unpack.
Yeah.
It's like, and I think it's very interesting about Awake because it is vignettes, and like there are more levels to it, but it's like, oh my god, I think in every community or just any generation, there's just so much more to unpack
Yeah.
and discover, and it would be really interesting to see, I guess, what happens next.
It will come back, but probably not. It may be a continuation of that story, but another story.
Yeah.
Um, that because I think we started to talk about these things, but then the conversation has stopped or gone underground. Maybe I don't know. Maybe the conversations are still happening, but I think people are now just focused on the election and seeing what our future is really going to be. I think there's a lot of fear. I know I'm nervous because I don't know. Um,
I'm nervous.
and if I know, and I'm not ashamed to say that or afraid to say that I'm nervous. I'm scared because I don't know. I know the people around me how we're voting, but I can't. I don't know how the rest of the country is going to vote. Because last time we thought they were going to vote a certain way, and it did not happen that way at all. Even though he only won by a handful of votes, but still, um, um, I don't know because if he gets another 4 years, and who knows, it may be more than that, but because he's talking 12, he might find a way to make that happen. And he gets houses in his favor, we are fucked. And
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know if I can curse on your podcast, but no other way to explain it. I am, whoa, I don't know what I'll do. I don't know. Meaning, like, I don't know if I could stay here
Yeah.
and, find a way out, find a job overseas or something. I don't know. I don't know I could do it. The only thing keeping me here now would be my family, but I'm like, Mom, I gotta go. uh, I'll fly back home at Christmas or something, but I can't. So we'll see. I'm optimistic. I very much am, but I'm also fearful at the same time. Cautiously optimistic. Is that what you say? I don't
Yeah,
know.
I would say I feel the same way. Back in 2016, I did not believe that Hillary was going to win. I really
You
believed.
didn't. Wow.
No, I had a feeling. I was like, something's up, something's wrong. And the funny thing is, I mean, this is going off topic, but I remember telling my parents that early in the year, it was like around springtime, I remember thinking, oh my God, Trump is going to win. And my father was like, no, Keisha, he's not. That's stupid. Why do you think that? Come on, he's not going to win. Like, my dad was downplaying it so much. And then
Yeah.
when he won, I my dad was so quiet because he was just like, I guess he was just in shock, and I was just like, I told you, the fact that he came this far, there's something really eerie about this, and
Yeah.
and there's something wrong with our entire political system. I mean, there's so many things that are, that haven't been addressed in this country, and I just feel like having Trump as president kind of brings out all of that dirtiness that America has in the past, in its history,
It's
and
been there from the beginning. Yeah.
it's been there from the beginning. And I just feel like, like, yes, I didn't believe that she was going to win back in 2016, and I'm fearing now that same thing's going to happen all over again. But again, also being optimistic as well, I do feel as though there's so much garbage that America has. And
Yeah.
there's so much like sickness and like so much dirty history and bloody history that America has that
Yeah.
hasn't really been addressed fully.
I don't know if it ever will. I mean, they start indoctrinating us into this belief system in kindergarten. Um, One of the people I like to listen to, or sometimes, is Jane Elliott.
Hmm.
If you ever watch her videos, she said, I think she's amazing. She's doing God's work, I think. She's this like diversity educator, and she um, is the real deal. And I think we've been taught that from the get-go, since grade school. A certain way to look at history, and then you get to college where your views are challenged, depending on what school you go to. I know mine were by friends that again, people I met, and other books were shoved into my hands, and I was like, well, this is the real history. This is what they didn't tell you. And so now I started re-educating myself, and just in the last, I think probably in the last 5 years, 5 to 6 years, I've started actively re-educating myself by going back, like I said earlier in our talk, going back to those old books that I read in my African American history studies classes, and then reading new ones and other, certain writers, new writers that have come on the scene, and just staying um, informed and educating myself even more than I, you know, have in the past. And my book reading list is like insane. And I'm just devouring books around the clock. So it's because I think not only will it help me, but it will also help my art.
Mm-hmm.
So I know the stories that need to be told. So
Yeah. I also really believe that we can't move forward unless we really address what's really going on, and I to circle this back to Awake,
yeah,
that's exactly how I felt when I saw the End Connection, right? Because
yeah,
they couldn't move forward unless they really addressed what was really happening. And I feel
yeah.
like
And you don't, yeah.
I was just gonna say, I feel like that really that's so relative, and that happens in reality. Is that we talk about these things over and over again, but we can't move forward unless we really address what's really, truly, truly, deeply in its roots, what's really happening.
Yeah, some people asked me after they saw that particular play, they said, do they do they get together? Do they work through it? I said, that's up to you to decide. You're the audience. You can create the ending yourself. I just kind of leave it. She decides not to go to the party with him that night. And but you don't know if he ends up going or what. Or if he stays there with her, it's kind of left open ended. So um so you don't know what the outcome of that situation is going to be. Does he go deeper and decide to confront his uncle or not? You know, because that's a deep thing. Because that was an excuse I heard from a lot of people. It's like, yeah, my parents use this stuff. They say racist things around me, and I just ignore it sometimes. But it gets exhausting correcting them all the time because this is how they grew up. And I'm like, that's not an excuse. If you're silent, you're complicit. How do you think I feel? If you think that's exhausting for you? How about me every day of my life?
If you're silent, you're inducing violence. That's how I see it.
Exactly.
Exactly
Yeah.
how I see it. You know.
So the uncomfortable atmosphere or the deal with the conflict
Yeah.
basically. If whenever you have to, just take it on and you'll be a better person for it, and the world will be better too. But a lot of people don't have that energy or don't want to do that. They just rather pretend they didn't hear something or see something.
Yeah.
And I think they're convincing themselves that in their minds that, I didn't really see that, or that person will change, or I can't change them. What's the point? You know?
I would love to ask you more questions, but again, like I do keep the podcast a little tight because people have short
Yeah.
attention spans, so you know how that goes.
Yeah, I know.
But Laurel, thank you so much for answering my questions and going deep with the Awake, because it was super helpful, and I love talking about these things, and I really, really do appreciate what you brought on stage. I do have to say that, and I really mean that. And I actually brought my boyfriend Frank to watch it, and even he was just moved, So
Oh, wow.
by the way, that moment when on the date when she does spill the drink on him or throw the drink on him,
Yeah.
he turned to me and he said, "She did that for all of us."
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, "Yep."
Awesome. Great.
Yeah, I just, I'm really happy to see this, because I just feel like it's just so important, and I'm sure people have told you that as well, how important.
Yeah, that was the feedback. It was all mostly positive. I mean, I think someone wrote on a site, or those people are like, it was all about bashing white people. I'm like, well, you're gonna have that, so whatever.
Yeah.
Bring it on. So it was a lot less of that than I thought there would be, but people really got a lot out of it, because I say me and Christine, my dramaturg, and the cast worked really, really, really hard, and so we were very, very proud of that. There's still group chats that they're on, occasionally, that we're on together, because that it really bonded us. And people have gone into other shows and films and whatever, but we still communicate with each other, because it was a very, very rewarding experience for all of us.
Thank you so much for listening to Laurel's journey with Awake. Don't forget to follow the Dark Brown channel for more information about Awake and future episodes on the Every Shade podcast.